What is up, guys? We're a couple days away from UFC 290, International Fight Week. We're finally here, and it's time to sweep the card. I'm giving my full card predictions for all the fights that I haven't broken down yet, and I'm really hyped about all of these. Even the Dana White Contender Series fights for Bo Nickal and Jack Della Maddalena, they're going back in time, but I'm still hyped even though they're fighting cans. And I just want to give a special shout out to a new sponsor. And at the end of this video, we're going to be looking at some odds because I'm officially with my bookie, and if you guys are interested in getting a welcome bonus up to 50%, you can use code Lucas. We're gonna get to that at the end of the video, but first things first, it's time to get it cracking with the first fight. Let's get right to it. All right, the first fight, Tatsuro Taira, the 23-year-old Japanese phenom versus Edgar, Chairez, rocking that black and white cutout, so you know he's coming off of the Dana White Contender Series. And he got out-grappled on the Dana White Contender Series. And this is a fight that he's taking on short notice. And when a striker like Edgar Chairez, that is a decent striker, is taking on a grappler on short notice as good as Tatsuro Taira, a guy that knows how to impose his will, that is going to make quick and easy transitions on the grounds to find a submission, it's not good news. Tatsuro Taira is coming off of a first-round submission over Little T-Rex Arms Jesus Aguilar, and before that, a second-round sub by armbar to beat CJ Vergara. And Edgar Chairez got out-grappled by Clay Carpenter, and Clay Carpenter is another pretty talented prospect with good grappling, and I think we're going to see something similar. Tatsuro Taira is going to take this man down. As much as I'd like to see him strike, as a greedy UFC fan that wants to see the prospect's entire game, he's going to impose his will, he's going to play it smart, and he's going to submit this guy in the first couple of rounds. That is my pick, and who knows, if Edgar Chairez can stuff the takedowns, then we'll finally get to see how good Tatsuro Taira is in his whole game. But I'm going with him by submission, first or second round. Vitor Petrino, this guy is a freak. Now, Marcin Prachnio is the guy that just fought William Knight, who everyone clowned because he didn't do anything. So do not let this man fool you for getting a win over a big puncher in William Knight, because William Knight didn't throw anything in that fight. And I do have to say this, Prachnio's 6'3", he's got a long man's game. He was able to beat an explosive guy like Khalil Roundtree. But Vitor Petrino, I know he doesn't look that tall on screen right now. He's 6'2". He is incredibly explosive. This man is not going to get held at range by little kicks from Marcin Prachnio with nothing on them. No, he's going to rush into range and beat this man to a pulp, and I'm going to pick him by first or second round TKO. He's going to be shooting missiles on old man Marcin Prachnio. Vitor looks like he's 35, but he's only 25, which is an even better sign. Now, he's probably on some sauce if he's looking that old, but this guy's a unit, and again, once you get up to that upper echelon, that's when a guy like Vitor Petrino is going to struggle, but not right now. Not against a guy like Marcin. He's too talented. He's too physically robust for this guy. So I think he's going to get in his face and just shoot missiles off until he finds a KO over the slower Marcin Prachnio that likes to beat up on shorter, stocky men. On to the next one, Robbie Lawler versus Nikko Price. I understand that if you were to make this fight like 3 or 4 years ago, even when that wasn't Robbie Lawler's prime, I would be really hyped. I'd be expecting a war. But I'm just expecting a Mr. Krabs without the body, just a shell of Robbie Lawler to show up. He's gotten beaten up time and time again. He got beaten up by Bryan Barberena, who wouldn't hold a candle to Robbie Lawler in his prime. And he's gotten beaten up by Neil Magny, man. He's going to get his ass kicked by Nikko Price. Now, I'm not saying that Nikko Price is just going to go out there and wallop him from the get-go. He takes a little bit of time to get going, but he's wild. And even though he himself is also, coming to the end of his career, he isn't as much of a shell as Robbie Lawler. I know a lot of fans were complaining about this being on the main card, or not being on the main card, I mean. Dude, how are you supposed to get hyped for a Robbie Lawler fight? He's not the same guy. He shouldn't even be fighting. I would not care if this man were to not fight on the card, bro. I mean, I've always been saying it. You may as well give Robbie Lawler a fight night main event. If you're going to do like Macy Barber as a fight night main event, you may as well do Robbie Lawler to actually pay him some respect, okay? Because he's going to get completely engulfed by all the other good fights on the card. I believe this is his last fight, and it is at least good that the UFC isn't giving him a young prospect that's going to completely tear through him. They are respecting him enough to give him another older man. But Nikko Price, I just think, is a little bit more durable. Robbie Lawler is going to lose this fight, guys, and it's just not going to look pretty. And I know people are going to be pretending that they're super, super hyped for Robbie Lawler. I don't buy it at all. And as I said, if you really want to pay this man respect, don't put him on the prelims where he's going to get completely overshadowed by all the other good fights. But also don't put him on the main card because it's not an important fight and it's not going to be that impressive. This is not the same Robbie Lawler of the past. So I would have liked him to main event. At least that would mean a little bit more. At least he would be the star of the show and he can go off with a bang. Put him in his hometown. Fuck it. Either way, Nikko Price is going to win this one. I'm going to pick him by either a decision or like a second round TKO. But let's get to Saaiman versus Terrence Mitchell. Finally, we're back to high level skill. Saaiman, I believe he's only 23 years old. One of the best prospects in the lighter weight classes, bantamweight. And this guy's just incredibly well-rounded. He was supposed to fight the man that took out Raul Rosas Jr., Yair Rodriguez, but now Terrence Mitchell stepped in. Now, Mitchell is fighting out of Alaska, and he's also a grappler himself. Now, Saaiman has a very well-rounded game, and he can grapple as well. Of course, he trains with Dricus du Plessis, who's a phenomenal grappler. Terrence Mitchell has a ton of finishes on the ground, a lot of submissions, and that's pretty much his game. But you look at this man, how old do you think he looks? This guy looks like he's maybe, what, 26, 28? This guy's like 33 years old. And I looked at the people that he's beating, again, Alaska FC, basically, bro. This guy is not taking out great opponents. I truly believe that Saaiman is going to show levels. As crazy as that sounds, he's only 23 years old. He's going to show levels, but he's very well-rounded and solid on the feet. And unless Terrence Mitchell has some like hidden nuclear power in his hands, I don't think he's going to out-grapple Saaiman that's already shown to have really good grappling ability. And I'm going to pick Saaiman by a dominant decision. But I'm really looking forward to this because, again, I don't think Saaiman's going to have an easy time out-grappling this guy, Terrence Mitchell, because even though he is a decent grappler, Saaiman hasn't really grappled against guys that are elite yet. He's still very young in his career, but I'm going to be confident in picking Saaiman. I really like this prospect, and I'm looking forward to seeing his evolution in the game. Alonzo Menifield versus the shittiest striker in the UFC. Guys, all right, I'm not going to beat around the bush. Jimmy Crute is probably the worst striker I've ever seen since Ben Askren. He is absolutely terrible. He has T-Rex arms, and on top of that, his chin is awful. And Alonzo Menifield beat the brakes off of him in their last fight in the second and third round. Now, yes, Jimmy Crute's grappling is pretty damn solid. He was able to out-grapple Paul Craig and find a submission over him. Like, Jimmy Crute has the ability to take down Alonzo Menifield like he showed early on in their last fight, dunk him on his back, and just out-grapple him for 3 rounds. But I don't think his cardio is going to hold up, and Alonzo Menifield was actually the fresher guy. I know that sounds crazy to just look at this guy. He looks like someone that's going to gas out in 2 seconds and just have a ton of lactic acid buildup, but he was the one that outworked Jimmy Crute later on in that fight and was just beating him to a pulp. Anytime they were on the feet, I'm telling you right now, I was afraid that Jimmy Crute was going to get KO'd. Not like afraid as in, he's one of my favorite fighters, but at any moment, he looks like he's just there to be KO'd. All right, little T-Rex arms, not a lot of sting on those punches, and just very slow and awkward as well. He's got the worst build you could possibly imagine for fighting in the upper weight classes when it comes to the striking. Truly sloppy. So if he doesn't get a submission over Alonzo Menifield when both of these men are dry, if he's not able to take his back super easily or get like a head and arm triangle, I believe it's going to play out similarly to the last one. And I wouldn't even be surprised if Alonzo Menifield has gotten better with his takedown defense and he goes out there and knocks Jimmy Crute out in the first round. I really think he's going to put Jimmy Crute away. How am I supposed to pick this guy? He's been knocked out so many times. I don't think he's going to make it out of this one, guys. And I think after a couple more fights, we might not even see this guy in the UFC. So I'm going to pick the old man Alonzo Menifield to beat Jimmy Crute. I understand that Jimmy Crute's the younger guy. He has more room to improve, but on the feet, I'm sorry, a guy that's just good at laying people out, that has natural talent and decent speed and decent athleticism is always going to be a nightmare for Jimmy Crute. And I think that Alonzo Menifield has it within him to at least stay safe in the grappling exchanges early on. I'm going to go with a second round KO for Alonzo Menifield, but I wouldn't be surprised if it ends in the first. Jack Della Maddalena is heading back to the Dana White Contender Series because this fight in the grand scheme of things is going to mean absolutely nothing. And the worst thing about this fight is that we've seen Jack Della Maddalena have 4 or 5 fights in the UFC already, and he's basically back to the Contender Series. This fight is going to be like Sean O'Malley's Chris Moutinho fight. When is the last time you've heard anyone bring up O'Malley's performance or anything good that he did against Moutinho as a reason to pick him in a future fight? No one mentions that at all right? And I understand that Josiah Harrell is 7-0, and he's got a grappling base, and that's at least the silver lining. At least Jack Della Maddalena is fighting a guy that is going to try to grapple against him like Sean Brady was, but this is going to be the most impoverished version of Sean Brady that you could ever imagine. And Sean Brady's not that big for the welterweight division. This guy is tiny for 55, right? He's short and stocky for 55. He's basically like Volkanovski with a tiny bit more muscle, and he's going up to welterweight. He is going to look puny. He's going to look like Deron Wynn, or Deron fucking L. What's this motherfucker's name that trains with DC? Deron Wynn. That short, stubby guy that thought he could just, you know, basically take DC's role as the short man in the upper weight classes. It's not going to work out in this case for Josiah Harrell. He's going to get finished. And I understand it's going to be fun, but it certainly isn't going to get you to react where you're putting your hands on your head and you're in absolute shock. Oh my God, Jack Della Maddalena just finished him. We expect that, okay? And I'm just going to say it, man. The only way this is going to be that amazing to watch is if Josiah Harrell somehow fights back and does a good job. Otherwise, it's going to be forgettable. And hey, at least Jack Della Maddalena is still fighting on the card, but this is one of the reasons why I don't consider this card to be stacked anymore. It's a good card, don't get me wrong, but because we have two guys going back on the Contender Series, Jack Della Maddalena and Bo Nickal, it's like, is it really stacked anymore, or is it just bare minimum? You know, once again, if Jon Jones is fighting, just because he's fighting doesn't mean it's that big. If you're pulling out a hobo from the side of the street to face Jon Jones, and Conor McGregor's coming back to fight a can from, you know, the LFA that's also 40 years old, we're not going to get that hyped for those matchups just because it's Conor and Jon Jones. You want to see them fight someone that's at least decent. And I understand that Josiah Harrell is not a hobo off the side of the street, but you're kind of getting my point. It ultimately is going to mean nothing. And I'm going to pick him by first round KO. I think he's going to body shot this guy into oblivion and just completely fuck him up as soon as he touches him. That's the thing about Jack Della Maddalena. Because he has been getting ready for a grappler in Sean Brady, and now this is a poor man Sean Brady, who's going to be weaker than Brady, who is probably not as seasoned of a striker as Brady, he's probably going to put him out very easily because he's over prepared for someone like Josiah. But on to the next one. Bo Nickal heading back to the Contender Series against another short, stubby guy that shouldn't even be fighting at middleweight. He's basically a can. He's even worse than Josiah Harrell because this man is in his 30s. I think he's like 5'8". So once again, a Deron Wynn situation, a guy trying to fill that role of a big stocky DC, but it ain't gonna work. And if you've looked at Val Woodburn fight, he's basically a pumped up bodybuilder, William Knight type of guy. And he doesn't have a lot of steam. He doesn't have a good gas tank. I think this guy is going to get tossed on his head and submitted in the first 2 minutes. And I really hope that Bo Nickal doesn't try to just fuck around and pitter pat with this guy just to see what he can do, just to rack up some time in the octagon to gain experience. I hope he just, I don't know, shows us an impressive takedown at least, because that's all you could really ask for. First round submission, first couple minutes for Bo Nickal. This is going to be a walk in the park. Val Woodburn, not very good. Bodybuilder, William Knight style. Stocky. He's going to have those inflatable balloon arms like SpongeBob, and they're going to gas out real quick. If this fight goes the distance, we're just going to see Bo Nickal beat this guy to a pulp. But I don't think he's even going to be good enough to get there. All right, I think Bo Nickal's going to submit him extremely easily. Finally, we're getting back to something that is at least a little bit more competitive. Now, notice how I say a little bit more competitive, because Dan Hooker still can't really compete with Jalin Turner. And I understand Dan Hooker's a legend. I understand he's given us a bunch of good wars. And, oh, he's a city kickboxing guy. You know, he has more experience. Dude, he's going to get finished in the first round. That is my pick. I think Jalin Turner is going to TKO this guy. I don't care if he's, you know, still having a good time in the gym and he's fired up because they offered him Tony and he didn't like that. He's going to get smoked. And it's going to be a little bit sad to watch. It is what it is. Don't let this man fool you into thinking that, oh, now Dan is back and this is the resurgence of his career. It's not going to happen. Jalin Turner, it's not just that he's a really solid striker and he's fast. He has a shitload of power in his hands. Every time I watch this guy fight, I'm thinking to myself, bro, why is this guy not getting as much hype as Rafael Fiziev? I guess Fiziev is flashy. He's got the beard. He just looks like a really cool guy, I guess. But Jalin Turner is better. And Dan Hooker just isn't as tough as he used to be. And he has a game where he can get away with beating up guys that are not that tall and can't get in on the inside very easily. But it's not going to work against a guy like Jalin Turner, who's 6'3" with a 77-inch reach. And if he gets in on the inside of Jalin Turner, he is going to get smoked. Okay, that's one of the things that makes Jalin Turner so good. It's his ability to rip combinations in the pocket, especially with those hooks. He's got some of the best hooks in the lightweight division, and he can rip to the body and immediately come up top to the head. He's got a piston of a left hand. Remember, he's a southpaw, and he has power at the end of all of these shots. And you're talking about Dan Hooker's bread and butter being the kicks at range. That's not going to work. Jalin Turner's going to kick this man's body and put a hole through it. He has vicious leg kicks, vicious body kicks. I genuinely think that Dan Hooker's fucked. And you look at Dan Hooker's fights, at least his recent ones, even with Claudio Puelles, he looks like he's fighting in slow motion. I even watched his fights back in the day when he was in his prime against Dustin Poirier, against Paul Felder. He wasn't even fast back then, but he was extremely tough. And when he would get in on the inside, he's got some really nasty combos. He can go to the body, he can grab your head and smash your face with his knee. So he's good in the clinch, but Jalin Turner's 6'3". I don't even think Dan Hooker's going to be able to tie him up. And you can't get close to Jalin Turner because he's going to rip you with a hook. This guy has some of the nastiest hooks I've seen. And what makes him so good is that he also has the ability to go to the body, and he's so fast. So if he catches you to the body, he'll go up top to the head immediately afterwards, and then he'll rip back to the body. And it's like people just do not do a good job of handling his power. And I think in order to beat this guy, you have to either have a granite chin and shitloads of experience, and you can't be on the decline of your career, or you have to be a stud on the ground like Mateusz Gamrot. And guys, I picked Jalin Turner to beat Mateusz Gamrot. That's no secret. And I've said time and time again that if I were to see that fight again, I would pick Jalin Turner in a heartbeat, even if it were a 5-rounder. The guy did not gas out at all. He never got tired. And if anything, again, when strikers take on grapplers on short notice, they're the ones that are usually at a disadvantage. And if he had a full camp, he would get that win. So we're looking at a guy that's basically able to beat a Mateusz Gamrot, taking on Dan Hooker, who hasn't had a single win other than Claudio Puelles, who's a complete and utter disaster. Since what, Nasrat Haqparast? Nasrat Haqparast is 5'9". He has little pillow hands. He's a decision merchant, and he just sucks. And Dan Hooker can just keep him at range with his little slow motion kicks. He's 33 years old. He's taken way too much damage throughout his career. Any guy that he's taken on recently that is actually like good enough to be ranked has completely smoked him. Arnold Allen smoked him. Michael Chandler smoked him. Dustin Poirier gave this man a world-changing amount of damage, and the same thing can be said about Edson Barboza. Now, I don't think Jalin Turner is going to be spinning like Edson Barboza, but he can also fight at range. And Dan Hooker's whole game is to beat up on guys that, again, he can fight at range, and he can make them pay when they close the distance in the clinch. He's not going to be able to do that against Jalin Turner. I think Turner's going to finish him in the first round, and this is my most confident pick on the entire card, other than Robert Whittaker. He's been saying, Dan Hooker that is, that he feels like he's entering his prime and that he was super offended when the UFC offered him Tony Ferguson. I understood why he was offended because, of course, he understands that Tony is even more washed up than himself. And he said that he just got right back in the gym when the UFC offered him Tony because he was so pissed off that how dare they think that I'm on that level? I want to fight someone like Jalin Turner. Well, there are some times where you're just not going to be able to will yourself to beat someone that's more talented, that is faster than you, that hits harder, that's also really tough, and that is coming into their prime. When you're washed, there's nothing Dan Hooker can do to overcome the odds unless there's some kind of a fluke. It just has to be said. On to the next one. Brandom Moreno versus Alexandre Pantoja. I can't wait for this fight because honestly, guys, I have to just say this. When I went back to watch Alexandre Pantoja's fights, I was very impressed with just how tough this man is on the feet. Now, once again, we haven't really seen him fight that often, and that's why it's kind of easy to look past him because he's coming off of a really, dominant win over Alex Perez, who he basically just ran across the octagon, got in his face, spammed combinations, took this guy's back and choked him out all in like a minute and a half. And it's like, you can't really get too much out of that fight. But the first thing that I want to say is that's Alex Perez, bro. Alex Perez is the easiest fight of Deiveson Figueiredo's entire career. He's not that good. And he certainly isn't Brandom Moreno on the ground or on the feet. But Alexandre Pantoja is such a beast early on. This guy's so tough. He has absolutely no respect whatsoever for any flyweight's power. This guy was walking down Deiveson Figueiredo like it was nothing. And he eventually paid for it and he got dropped against Deiveson Figueiredo. But my point is, he's going to have that kind of confidence. Now, I'm just going to say this. Brandon Moreno looked like shit when he fought Alexandre Pantoja in their last bout. I think this was what, 2018? Brandon Moreno was 24 years old and Alexandre Pantoja was 28. So let me ask you this. Who was closer to their prime? I understand Pantoja's gotten a lot better, but I guarantee you this. He was closer to his prime than Brandon Moreno was. Brandon Moreno has improved more than Alexandre Pantoja has. And Moreno has improved enough to become a champion, to beat the guy that beat Alexandre Pantoja. And I understand that Pantoja is going to run across the octagon. He's going to try to submit Brandon Moreno off the rip. He's going to try to take his back. Brandon Moreno has incredible takedown defense. I mean, the amount of takedowns I saw him stuff from a guy like Deiveson Figueiredo was incredible. Deiveson Figueiredo is a force to be reckoned with, at least physically, in that division, and has very good grappling. And on top of the takedown defense, Brandon Moreno's ability to scramble is amazing. And he is also himself an elite level grappler. I would say that his grappling, if anything, looks a little more clean than his striking. He still at times can be wild. He can still throw these crazy, lead overhands and these winging hooks. But the thing that he's changed in his game is the ability to throw really solid basic kicks and jabs. That's something that he didn't really have going for him when he fought Alexandre Pantoja. So I think he has answers for whenever Pantoja closes the distance. It's that jab. Brandon Moreno has one of the best jabs in the UFC. That was what he was able to use to destroy Deiveson Figueiredo in their rematch. And he was able to drop Deiveson Figueiredo and submit him. I believe he dropped him with a jab too. And we're looking at Moreno's submission ability. It's there as well. He is one of the best grapplers in that division. I'd say that he's probably up there with Pantoja. Pantoja is obviously a little bit stronger than Brandon Moreno. He's a bit more of a physical force, but Moreno, again, 24 years old when he fought Pantoja, he's probably the strongest he's ever been. He's smack dab in the middle of his prime. 29 versus the 33-year-old Pantoja. I'm going with Brandon Moreno by decision. All right? There haven't been many champions in the lighter weight classes at the age of 33, 34. And Brandon Moreno, I still think he's getting a lot better. And Pantoja is getting more confident. I think he's probably the wisest he's ever been. He's probably, at that point where he has a perfect system to beat people. But if he doesn't submit Brandon Moreno early when both of them are dry, and I think it's going to be really difficult to take down Moreno because his takedown defense is just so good. He's able to keep balance on one foot. He'll hop around. And it just seems like you have to work your ass off to even get there. And once you do get him there, the guy's a madman with his scrambles. And the last point that I have, guys, even though Alexandre Pantoja's tough as nails, he's got a good chin, Deiveson Figueiredo had a good chin. Deiveson Figueiredo was tough as nails. And in their third fight between Moreno and Figgy, where they went to war and Figgy got his hand raised because of the knockdowns, Brandon Moreno was stunning Figgy left and right. And the commentators, including myself, had noticed that Brandon Moreno had, it seemed like, the power advantage in a lot of moments of that fight. And that was the first time we've seen Moreno really have some real good power. And I think that his cardio is so much better and his boxing is improved. Alexandre Pantoja does not have a lot of experience in 5-round fights, right? I mean, I've seen this guy slow down even in fights in which he's been able to finish fast. For example, against Brandon Royval, he slowed down quite a bit even before getting the submission. It just looked like at the end of the first round, because it was such a high pace, he was starting to fade a little bit. Now, of course, he eventually found the back, and once he's on the back, he's just so much more comfortable there. But against Deiveson Figueiredo, he was slowing down, and Figueiredo's not even the guy that has like the best gas tank. He's a guy that, you can take the steam off of his shots by the end of the fight. I think that Pantoja is going to get beat by decision, guys. I think that Moreno is going to be putting up a hell of a struggle on the ground early. He's going to stuff a lot of the takedowns, and if Pantoja does not submit him, even though he'll make it close on the feet early on, once Brandon Moreno gets it going with the boxing, once he gets into a rhythm, he's just going to outdo Alexandre Pantoja, and he's going to get into a flow state. And I'm going to pick him 48-47 or 49-46. Moreno, in my opinion, is the most well-rounded guy in that division. Pantoja's well-rounded too, but he's not as crisp on the feet as Moreno anymore. He doesn't have as many great weapons on the feet. He kind of just charges into your range and tries to bulldoze you. He has a couple of good leg kicks, a couple of good body kicks, but his kicks are really the only part of his game that actually looks like he can keep that up for 5 rounds at a decent pace and chip away at you. but Moreno's got so many weapons. I think he's going to get it done by decision. He is going to struggle early on because Pantoja is going to come out of the gate really aggressive, looking for the back. But if he survives, I think Pantoja is going to gas himself out a little bit, looking for the finish. And Moreno is going to get settled in. He's going to start popping the jab. He's going to start hitting, Pantoja with leg kicks and body kicks. And he's just going to overwhelm him. And I think we're going to see him work his wrestling in as well, because that's something that he actually has started doing a little bit more offensively. We saw it against Figueiredo in their last fight. He was able to control Figgy on the ground at multiple moments. And I get it. That Figueiredo is not prime Figueiredo. It looks like Figueiredo has missed a step, but he out-grappled Figueiredo, and Pantoja didn't. That's all I'm going to say. So I'm picking Brandom Moreno 49-46 by decision. I think he's going to mix it up and just be a little bit better everywhere the fight goes, except for the early going. The early going is going to be tough for him, and he just has to survive the grappling, and he has to just fight defensively on the ground at first. But Moreno's going to get this one done. Dricus du Plessis versus Robert Whittaker. Guys, I like Dricus du Plessis a lot. I've been listening to his interviews, and he's been saying things like, no one's been able to figure me out yet, and I know my style's ugly. Well, the reason why no one's been able to figure you out is because they're fools and they're fighting at middleweight and they're not very good. Robert Whittaker is championship caliber. I do not think that Dricus du Plessis has a good chance. His grappling is where he's best at, and he's not going to be able to do that against Robert Whittaker, a guy that's going to serve up some scrambled eggs every time he tries to shoot. And on the feet, this is the sloppiest fighter Whittaker has fought since Derek Brunson. Now, to be fair, some of you guys corrected me. The last time Whittaker has had a finish was against Jacare Souza, but I brought up Derek Brunson just because he has so many similarities to Dricus du Plessis. They're both sloppy. They both have their chin on silver platters. And Dricus du Plessis, I believe, is perfect for a guy like Robert Whittaker, who's so good at changing angles, who's so fast and agile. And I think that Robert Whittaker is going to get out of the way of one of these combinations of Dricus du Plessis, and he's going to angle off and catch him with a head kick in the second round. Or I could see him angling off and hitting him with a big right hand. And I get it, Whittaker doesn't have like the most power in his hands, but he's the best he's ever been. He's only 32 years old. He's probably just now smack dab in the middle of his prime. He's one of the only guys in the UFC that has had this much adversity in his career, that has had wars, that's been around for a long time, that is still super elite in his early 30s. Like, he's basically the Max Holloway of the middleweight division, and to beat him, you have to be championship level caliber. And Dricus du Plessis is not. He is the epitome and the embodiment of a middleweight who just happens to fluke his way up to the top because the division is so terrible. And Robert Whittaker, even though he hasn't finished anyone in a long time, is going to finish Dricus du Plessis because he is basically Derek Brunson 2.0. And I understand that Dricus du Plessis is tough, but sometimes it's just the shots that you don't see. And even though everyone expects that high kick to come, they're not able to deal with it. And Dricus du Plessis is going to be the one guy that gets caught with a high kick when he's running, okay? And he's running forward. And Robert Whittaker changes angles. And it's just the perfect momentum where he catches him and he puts him down and he finishes him. I think Robert Whittaker gets him out of there in the second round. Alexander Volkanovski versus Yair Rodriguez. I think that people are overrating Alexander Volkanovski's ability to stand with Yair for the entirety of the fight. Now, here's what I got at last time. I said that Alexander Volkanovski would be a fool to strike with Yair Rodriguez. I know that Alexander Volkanovski is probably the best striker in the UFC, right? He's very defensively sound. He comes prepared. He has brilliant reaction time, but Yair Rodriguez is just a different beast. I think that Volkanovski is going to have success on the feet like he would normally have. It's just that you cannot maintain that for 5 rounds and stay safe against a freak like Yair. Yair Rodriguez is a fucking alien, all right? This guy is not normal. The only thing that he has, that he doesn't have, that's not 100 out of 100 maxed out, is his power on the feet, right? And he still is pretty damn powerful. I think that Alexander Volkanovski needs to take him down, all right? And if I don't see Volkanovski shooting a takedown in the first round, I'm going to be scared shitless, all right? Unless he goes out there and just beats him to a pulp right off of the bat and looks amazing. When Volkanovski starts yelling, that's how you know that he's going to take over the fight. So if Volkanovski starts yelling, I'll feel a little bit better. And he says, oh yeah, come at me. Something like that, I'll be okay. But if it's just close striking exchanges, even if Alexander Volkanovski gets the better of Yair, I'm still going to be scared shitless. He cannot strike with this guy for that long. It's just too risky. Yair is so fucking fast and unpredictable and also has amazing footwork. And I'm really excited to seeing how these guys are going to kick with each other. I know Yair is going to be throwing kicks. I know he's going to be throwing low kicks and body kicks because not many people have tried to throw kicks against Alexander Volkanovski. Sure, people have thrown head kicks every now and then, but Yair has the ability to do that at a high output, at a high clip with power for 5 rounds. But Alexander Volkanovski also has some awesome lead leg kicks. Those are his bread and butter kicks. It's going to be hard for Volk to kick with Yair because Yair moves around so much and he can stand at range because he's so long. I think Volk is going to have to take him down. But if Volkanovski takes him down, he is going to pass the guard of Yair Rodriguez. I truly believe that all the specifics training that he's doing with the B team is going to allow him to overcome whatever Yair Rodriguez has to throw at him in the guard. I think he's going to get past that guard, and when he does, I truly believe that Yair is going to go from someone that's a nightmare to deal with to your run-of-the-mill fighter in the featherweight division, okay? I don't think he's that excellent anywhere else on the ground other than his guard, and I believe that Alexander Volkanovski is going to slow him down and start to beat his ass. And even if Alexander Volkanovski is in the guard, he can always stack it as well and, you know, trap the heels of Yair and rain down punches. But if you look at Volkanovski's earlier fights throughout his career, what was he doing? Just look up Volkanovski versus any of his early opponents. All of the photos you're going to find, or at least most of them, are him beating people up on the ground. And he's going to go back to his bread and butter. And he's got the perfect build to do that as well. He's going to be stronger than anyone Yair has ever faced. Again, he's built like a mini tank. And once he starts to get control of Yair Rodriguez on the ground, all those crazy spinning techniques on the feet are going to start to be a little bit easier to read. And that is when Volkanovski will be safer on the feet. That's when he'll be able to let his combinations go a little bit more. So once again, I don't think Alexander Volkanovski is going to strike with this man. And I don't think it's crazy to say that he can't strike with him for 5 rounds because it would just be fucking foolish. But I am still, you know, trusting in Volk's skills on the feet and his ability to stay safe. And I think this is the time in which he's more prepared than ever before when it comes to dealing with flashy spinning kicks and leg kicks and body kicks, because he's gotten all of these great looks, even though he's been training with Blood Diamond. And that's a very worrisome training partner, because I'm not really thinking that Blood Diamond is that great of a training partner for a Yair Rodriguez. He's slow and awkward. Yair Rodriguez is awkward but fast and also technical. But he's training with his Van Roon guy, okay? And he's probably brought some other people in. And he's probably, you know, training for wildness on the ground as well. And I think Volkanovski is going to slow down Yair. He's going to beat him to a pulp on the ground in the middle of the fight. And once Yair is just not as quick twitch on the feet and things are easier to read, Volkanovski is going to start to eat him alive up there as well. So yeah, I'm picking Alexander Volkanovski to beat up Yair Rodriguez in the middle of the fight and beat him up on the feet a little bit in the later rounds and just be too much for Yair. I think Yair is going to feel so small in there compared to an Islam Makhachev. And even though I'm picking Yair Rodriguez to beat Alexander Volkanovski in the first round, meaning I think he's going to get the better of Volk, just landing bigger shots when he's at his fastest. And even if Volk takes him down, Yair is going to land some clean elbows and he's going to be a bitch to deal with down there. And he's just going to look like Volk's not having any success. I'm picking Volkanovski to win the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. My ultimate scorecard right now is going to be 49-45. That means Volk is going to get a 10-8 and a bunch of 10-9s. Yair is going to edge out the first round. But hey, as a massive Volkanovski fan, you know, if you're also a big Volk fan, you may as well throw some cheddar on Yair because you'll feel a lot better if he wins, okay? Because he's a big underdog in this fight, and at least that'll soften the blow. So these are my picks, but now let's get into the odds. Okay, now it is time to look at some odds. I'm heading over to mybookie.ag, and once again, guys, if you're looking for a welcome bonus, use code Lucas when you sign up for a 50% welcome bonus, which means if you throw in 50 bucks, you'll get 25. If you put up 100 to play with, you'll get 50 extra. So without further ado, let's just get right into these odds. We're going to go right up here. We're going to click on UFC, and here we have the entire card for UFC 290. And I just want to say this right now, the prelims are usually the riskiest, but the first fight that I'd like to just bring up, this is exactly the one I like the most. Jalin Turner and Dan Hooker. Okay, if I'm looking at odds that I think are most likely, I am picking Jalin Turner to smoke Dan Hooker in the first or second round. And Jalin Turner is actually a quick starter, so I really like the under 1.5, which means that at under 1.5 rounds, Jalin Turner is going to beat Dan Hooker. And if he does that, it's plus 101. So you are going to be making some good money if you're betting on Jalin Turner to win in under 2 rounds. And I've seen a lot of this guy's finishes come at the start of the second round when he's already warmed up and he's already kind of softened his opponent up a little bit. So those are my favorite odds. But even if you just pick Jalin Turner to beat Dan Hooker by, anything, then you can still just be pretty safe with that bet. Some other odds that I really like are with the Alexandre Pantoja and Brandom Moreno fight. I like Alexandre Pantoja as an underdog because if there is someone that's going to get an early finish, it's probably going to be Pantoja, and it's probably going to be in the first round when both of them are dry if he gets the back. Now, of course, I'm picking Brandom Moreno. It's a close fight, but if you are trying to go with an underdog, this is the one to choose on this card. And I think that if you were going to choose Pantoja, picking him by submission would probably be your best bet. And here you have him by submission. If you look at the props, you see Pantoja by submission plus 330. I'm telling you guys right now, if he wins, he's probably getting it done by sub. And those are some excellent odds. Last but not least, we're going to look at Alexander Volkanovski and Yair Rodriguez. Now, looking at these props, I am still confident that if Volk wins, he's probably going to get it done by decision. And here you see Alexander Volkanovski by decision is minus 107. I do really like those odds. I mean, Yair is so tough, and there haven't been many finishes in featherweight fights, especially the higher you go up the rankings. People just know how to survive and stay safe, and I think that Yair is going to give Volk everything he can handle early on. So I do like those odds. And if you're going to pick Yair Rodriguez, I really recommend picking him by KO. He is plus 590 to win by a KO. And I think those are amazing odds because if he's getting this done, he ain't submitting Volkanovski, I'll tell you that much. Volk is going to get out of any submission unless he is completely and utterly rocked and out of it. And I think that if he was that rocked, Yair would just finish him off by TKO. And if you're talking about a decision, I don't think Yair is going to outwork Volkanovski and outpoint him and just outskill him in every aspect of MMA. Like, I just don't see him making Volkanovski look like a fool for 5 rounds or edging out a decision based on damage. I really think he would slow down the further on this fight goes. If he wins, it's probably going to be by KO. He's probably going to hurt Volkanovski on the feet. So if you're interested in capitalizing off of these picks, then when you sign up for my bookie, make sure to use code Lucas, that's LUCAS, for your promo bonus for 50%. Meaning, again, if you put up $50, you'll get 25. If you put up 100, you'll get 50. You put up 200, you'll get an extra 100 to play with. So make sure to use code Lucas so that you can get that welcome bonus from my bookie. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Until next time.